All right. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome everyone here tonight. And for the SEAC members, we are being video recorded tonight. So we've been asking for a while to be recorded so that we have it, and we are tonight. So
live stream.
And live streamed. Look at that. Now it's getting really exciting. So I want to welcome everyone back and hope that you had a great summer and you're refreshed and ready to work. There's a lot of stuff going on this year that's going to impact our students. And so I think as SEAC, we really need to get moving, or, not get moving because we have been. I do want to point out that many of us have been a little disappointed at the advocacy that's been happening at the board table. And we need to ensure that the students we represent have a voice and don't fall through the cracks. And I think this begins with the transition that's happening this year between Pearson and MM. And Superintendent Blackwell is here to talk to us about the transition plans and what's going on with that. We also have our autism classes that are being prepared to start. So we want to make sure that, I know that you put an update in your superintendent's message. And I think over the summer, there's been a lot of stuff happening, even though technically we are a lot. I know the school goes on vacation, but with the decision that happened on June 7th, there's still been a lot of activity that's been happening. I'm not sure if you're all aware, but there is an admin review that will be taking place of the PAR decision. Both the Bateman and Pearson communities came together to request that a review be done. So that will be happening. I don't think that'll involve SEAC per se, but just to let you know that that is happening. So there's lots of stuff going on. So I think it's going to be, we're going to have some packed agendas and lots of information being shared. I do want to introduce our new, Rebecca's leaving us.
I know, our new Rebecca.
And she didn't ask our permission if she could go. So I want to introduce Suzanne. She is going to be our new Rebecca. So you guys don't scare her away, please. But what I would appreciate if we can just go around the room and you guys can introduce who you are and where you are from. And then we'll quiz her at the end of the night. I'm too excited to say that. All right.
Diane Bannenbosch, Learning Disabilities Association of Halton.
Tammy Beatty, Learning Disabilities Association of Halton.
Ontario.
Hi, I'm Lou Morris.
Sherry Foster, Association for Bright Children, Halton.
Oh, there we go. Don Spence, ABC of Halton.
Jason Bartlett, member at large from Burlington.
I'm Kim Graves, trustee and vice chair from Milton.
And I'm Amy Collard from Burlington, trustee.
You already know me. All right, fantastic. So if we will continue moving along. My next thing is if I can get an approval of the agenda. Everyone received the agenda and there's printouts at the back if you would like some. So if I can get an approval of the agenda. Jason, seconded by Lou. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Fantastic. Do I have any notices of motions or reports to the board? I wouldn't think this early, but just putting it out there. All right. The next thing is the minutes from the June 6th meeting. I know that Rebecca and I believe Suzanne sent another copy out as well. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Diane, seconded by Jason. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? Moving right along. So as I said, we have a pretty packed agenda tonight. There's lots of updates and kind of as we're getting started. So the first thing is, I know you were all following, but Superintendent Blackwell has been assigned the fun task of overseeing the transitions from the PAR decision. So she is here to talk to us tonight about what's happening, particularly with the focus initially on the Pearson MM transition, since that's the one that is looming. So I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Blackwell to take it on.
Thank you. And the slides that I'm sharing this evening, they'll be forwarded to you, as well as I will be talking about a survey that I'd like you to look at. So thank you for having me this evening. As Denise has pointed out, we are very early in the year, and there are some key transitions that are happening this year. One of the things that we are committed to is working with SEAC to ensure that we do get feedback. And I'll talk about those opportunities. And I did share an update at the board meeting last Wednesday evening. So there will be a little bit of overlap, but I'd really like to put an offer out in terms of some of the opportunities specifically with SEAC. So if I could just draw your attention to these are the pieces that we heard loud and clear from many of the delegations that came to us through the process. One of the things that we are equally as committed to and that there's a huge interest in is the transition of students. And I had the opportunity to meet with Denise over the summer, so thank you for meeting with me over the summer, Denise. And we had a great conversation around the transitions, and we looked at the transitions, not only students coming from one school to another. We looked at students with special education needs. We looked at students that were in a school that will be receiving other students. And we know that there are many layers to the transitions. We have just begun that work, and one of the things that we are looking for, as you're sitting here and listening, is we are looking for SEAC membership on all of the integration committees that we talk about. So during the PAR process, we acknowledge that this is really difficult for people, and many of the decisions that were made in June were the what. We now are tasked with the how. And the how is going to be the important work that we will do going forward. And this work is going to be over 4 years. We know that there's a great deal of strength within our system with the people that work specifically with students with special education needs. We know that there are families that are committed and have great things to offer in terms of supporting those processes and letting us know what those processes, have worked for them in the past and some of the considerations moving forward. So that ongoing communication that we heard from you is something that we're very much committed to. We know that what we do as a school board and the commitment that we have for our students will not change. We are committed to making this work for students and their families. So let me take you through the next 4 years and the opportunities that will be out there. And I've categorized this into 4 areas of focus. So we have the Lester B. Pearson MM Robinson integration, so those school communities coming together. We have a focus group in Aldershot, and that's looking at a program that we don't know what it is yet, that an opportunity for students that is unique, that we haven't tried before in our schools, and I'll talk a bit later about that. We have an integration of students, an integration between Robert Bateman and Burlington Central High School, and we also have an integration between Robert Bateman and Nelson. And I'd just like to talk about a little bit about what Denise talked about in terms of the administrative review. And there are 2 that are going on, and they are separate. One is Lester B. Pearson, and one is Robert Bateman. And that review, that review will take place, and it is part of the process around pupil accommodation. It's an opportunity that the community has, and it's a next step in that process. There will be a review of our board, and did we follow the process that is laid out in our policy, and our policy has to also have been approved to be replicated, to be reflective of the ministry policy. So that being said, it's a review of the process, it's not a review of the decision. And I just wanted to clarify that. So in terms of the pieces that are happening, we know that there are students at Robinson, that there are transition pieces we have to continue and start to plan forward for that work because it's important for the staff and for the students and for families. So one of the things, the transition of students and those integration transition committees happen the year before students move. So if you look at the screen, you'll see that there is an integration committee that will be formed after school council elections, and those are coming up I think they're next week at both schools. That integration committee will be formed this year, and the task or the mandate of that committee is the successful transition of students, staff, families, and working with our communities. The exploration committee will also occur this year. There's a report to the board projecting an idea for February of 2018. And we know that there's some work to be done within our system around the IB program planning with the moving of an IB program from one location to another. There's also program and facility consultation, and we are looking at securing an architect to start to design based on program needs and facility needs, and I'll talk about that. So you'll see that there are 3 ovals up there, and those are the pieces that we're looking for SEAC input, feedback, and representation. I will talk about looking for a committee member, and I will talk about the role of the exploration committee and the consultation as we move forward. We also know that through the motions, there was a discussion around the secondary gifted placement locations. And so we looked at, through the data that we were looking at, the community asked us to look at the number of students that are choosing a secondary gifted placement in Burlington. We have one site at this time, and it's Nelson. We looked at the numbers, and we're talking about having 2 composite schools, one north of the QEW 403 and one south. And do we have the appetite or the population to do that? So we'll talk about what that survey looks like later on, and that's the first piece of your homework and some feedback. Next year, we are committed to monitoring the process that we did in terms of moving the Lester B. Pearson and MMR communities and working with them. Monitoring as specifically as looking at transitions for individual students and what were the things that we maybe have learned from that process. What are the things we can celebrate and build on for future transitions? Should we come up with a focus magnet concept, which could be something like you might have heard the words STEM or STEAM or innovation or entrepreneurial studies, or it could be an app design course, something that is bringing a program to Aldershot. If the work through the fall comes with a recommendation in February, then next year would be the development of that program. There will be ongoing updates through the year, specifically around program and facility consultation. We would, as we're moving forward, the program, the facility consultation will happen this year. Construction for facilities would be happening through the 18-19 school year, with the hope that a commitment to have students begin to visit the new facility, specifically students in this Community Pathways program, have the building ready spring of 2019, so that students know where they're going before they leave for that school year. And then the final year, the 2019-20, there will be integration committees formed for the transition of staff and students and families to the new location for the 2020 school year. And that is the integration committee will also have SEAC representation on those committees. Again, monitoring of the actions that we've taken, making sure that we report back and share some of the things that are happening, and more details will be shared around those monitoring pieces. So how can SEAC help support some of this work? As I talked about a few minutes ago, the integration committee representatives We would like someone from SEAC to be on the Lester B. Pearson M.M. Robinson Committee. We would like your feedback on the gifted location survey from a parent perspective, from a parent, whether you have a student with gifted profile or not. We'd like you to just look at it in terms of the feedback and the questions that are being asked. We're looking at opportunities to communicate, to participate in the focus exploration. One of the things, and I'll talk about that in a second, as well as the facilities, giving feedback and providing opportunities to give some input in terms of the design of the facility. Now, there will be lots of consultation with board staff. We've already started to connect with staff at Bateman, at Pearson, at M.M. Robinson, around the program options and facilities, as well as some of the specialty items that are happening, some of the specialty programs. So here's the integration committee meeting dates. When you're signing up for something, you kind of want to know what's the time commitment. We have a meeting once a month, and the top 5 bullets are in our policy in terms of people representing each school community. We have already added a SEAC member. When I spoke to Denise in the summer, we wanted to put something out there. I think she did send something to you, and looking for a volunteer. We also we know that we have strengths within our schools to lead this work. We also have reached out to our mental health lead to support the committee work. We do know that the work that's going to be done to support students and families are the staff, the students, and the parents within those communities. And we're also looking at students from each school. The committee, when they meet at the first meeting in October 12th, will decide and determine if there are additional members on that committee. From those committees, because parents are asking, how can they get involved if I'm not that one rep? There will be many subcommittees and opportunities for parents to really get the work done at the school level. The Aldershot High School Focus Group, there is an online form that is now available. It's on our website. There is going to be a message sent out looking for ideas. One of the things that we will do with that information is we will look for themes that are coming. I would assume that some of the themes from what I've heard from people will be STEM school, a STEM program, an arts program. There are many other ideas that are out there. Community members have already reached out. And so we'll take that information and we will have an open house, a stakeholder open house on Monday, November 13th. And then we'd like to get some further input from SEAC at that point in terms of some of the ideas, because we want this program to be something that is equitable. We know that all students in our board and outside of our board will have the opportunity to participate. So what have we done since June? It is the second week of school, and given that there is an administrative review ongoing, we did commit to planning and thoroughly planning and implementing what we said we were going to do. We are not spending any money beyond the architect at this point until we have a decision. We have connected with SEAC. We are looking at other boards. We know that there are lots of experiences within the province. We know that there are some best practices. The Ministry of Education has actually just produced a research document on the successes, and it talks about transitions of students specifically. We know that there are staff, parents, and community members that would like to have some input, and I've had quite a few conversations. I've been in Bateman, had some conversations with staff over the summer, met parents, met the community members, and anyone that wants to reach out and connect with me, I'll leave my information at the end. We are trying to provide communication as much as possible at this time. We don't want to provide too much information because the integration committees will support the planning for the students that they're working with. So for us to go and have a plan laid out from now till September of 2019 doesn't really allow for any ongoing dialogue and the differences and the uniqueness within school communities. We have, I believe we'll have an update at the board meeting next Wednesday on the architect. And we've also secured we've applied for early years capital funding. Superintendent Potter Barrick has worked with our community daycare partners. They're very excited in consultation in terms of finding locations for potential locations for the daycare facilities that are in Pearson and Robert Bateman. So where is the communication? We do have a board website that is now set up. It is one of the main sliders. When you go right to the board website, there are 4 or 5 sliders at the front. You can search by PAR implementation. On there are FAQs, and you'll see the pictures across the screen are unique to each school community. So there is a section specifically for Lester B. Pearson, M.M. Robinson, and there are FAQs, records of action. And again, those meetings haven't started, but that's where people can go to find individual questions and answers. We also have a an email address, Contact Us, which is on the right-hand side, which allows anyone to input questions and we'll respond. And if appropriate, we put them on the frequently asked questions section, something that would be pertinent to many people. Robert Bateman High School transitions. There are many layers to that process, so that you're aware of some of the layers. There are no program changes for 17-18. In 18-19, you'll see that there's an additional LEAP program that will be added to M.M. Robinson, and that's that north-south composite school. If you're not aware, M.M. Robinson does have a community pathways program as well. And in 19-20, you'll see that the grade 9 accelerated learning program will move to Burlington Central High School. And those are the courses, grade 9 and 10 accelerated learning lead to IB. Burlington Central High School will also receive students in the IB program in 2020. So the closure of Robert Bateman would be at the end of 2020, but that's just an overview of who's moving and where are they moving and when are they moving.
Yep. I'm sorry. Based on what I'm seeing there, are you saying the grade 9 essentials program, so the grade 11, 12 essentials students will not move to Nelson until it closes in 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
So students will not come in to Bateman in that school year for grade 9.
Okay, but the others will not move.
They are not moving
after 2020.
The school will close in 2020.
Okay,
and that's looking at the number of transitions for students as well. Mm-hmm. So coming from 8 to 9, and then, we're hoping that that facility at Nelson is giving us an opportunity to be ready and have students come and visit, right, and be ready to go.
Yep.
So what does that look like? We've also shared this communication, and these are the 4 regional programs, the north-south pieces. So if you look next year, the change will be there will be an essentials program offered at M.M. Robinson High School. As well, the gifted location survey will be going out after you look at it. Hopefully middle of October, giving families a chance to kind of get settled into school with all the communication they're having. And then Mark, through the Superintendent Zonnefeld, some information will be shared back. As well, families need to know what school they are going to for English and French immersion, and these will be communicated by school-specific letters, and these are basically the information here is for students that are currently in grade 8, where elementary families may or may not know what's been happening in Burlington. We will provide them with school-specific letters, both on regional programs and on English and French immersion program. So there are some changes for next year. Those pieces are actually presented in a video at the board website, but it was just to give you a glance of some of the communication that's happening.
Yep.
There were stars next to C.H. Norton and Tecumseh. What are the stars for?
So C.H. Norton right now, they feed into, for English program, they feed into Lester B. Pearson and M.M. Robinson. Next year, Lester B. Pearson will not be open. So all students, it's a change to the pathway from CH Norton. They will all feed to Robinson, and then to Tecumseh, the whole catchment will now go to Central. Previously, it was Central and Nelson. The catchment's been changed in the decision.
One other question. So I know we're doing the separation of north-south, but I am assuming that any students who live in the north who are at Bateman right now will be grandfathered with their peer group over to Nelson. So you have some essential students now from the north.
Yep.
Who would be in grade 9 at Bateman. We're not expecting them to leave their peer group and go up to are we?
No, I think grandfathering is probably a pretty...
Because they'll have been at that peer group for 3 years, and then to kind of suddenly say, I'm sorry, because you live north, you have to go to that.
The option will be there for families, for sure, because we have heard that some families are choosing not to attend based on location, and transport, whatever the reason is, it will be available for them, for sure. So in terms of the committee work, if anyone is interested in being part of the integration committee, I think it would be a valuable experience for us to have your feedback on that committee, to provide us some of those questions and the lens that you hear from where you sit. I know that Superintendent Zonnefeld will be providing ongoing feedback through SEAC meetings. I'd be happy to come back as needed and give more details as they become available. As I said, we know that much of the work in the planning is from the people that are in the places that they're in, and we want them to have a big say in that.
Okay. Yes, Tammy.
Do you know the number of students at Pearson that have IEPs?
I do not have it off the top of my head, no. But Pearson knows the number of students that has IEPs.
I was just curious for the planning, just so that we had an idea of how many students that had special needs were affected in the transition, that's all.
I do know, in having conversations with the principals are already meeting weekly. The new principal at Robinson is Claire Proto. And Claire is making herself very visible at Lester B. Pearson throughout this year. She's been over frequently. One of the things that we talked about in terms of her philosophy around transitions is that transitions need to be differentiated for students. It's not bring everybody together, put name tags on, and play games. It's how are we providing opportunities for students to come into the building, whether it be outside of the school day, whether it be students with their families and no one else in the building, whether it be opportunities within the school day. So that's something that is very much on her plate, and very much she's very much aware of the differing needs of families, and they'll seek those opportunities.
Can we please get that number, if possible?
84.
Do we know the current attendance at Pearson at the moment? So, because 84, what percentage, what's the current enrollment at Pearson, do you know?
335. Hi, Sophia.
I'm just wondering if we can get a copy of the presentation. Can it be forwarded to us?
It will be, yeah.
Awesome.
I think Suzanne's already sent it.
You already have it. It's in your email. There's a link there.
Yeah. Yes, Jason.
I have two questions, but I'm willing to ask the second if someone else is on the list. Your presentation addressed, I realize it's at a high level, but you're talking about English programs, French immersion, essentials, and IB and community CPP. I didn't see anything on there addressing what's happening with the SHISMs or with the OYAP programs.
So that's a good question. Some of the work is being started. Superintendent Julie Hunt Gibbons, is responsible for secondary program. She is meeting with departments, all 4 schools at this time, in the next few weeks. We have had ongoing dialogue. I've been in the school over the summer. We've talked about programs, and through those, because those pieces have to be part of the facilities and the design, architect design. So through Mark's department, through student services and school programs, there'll be a lot of discussion ongoing around what programs are existing. Right now, our focus is Robinson and Pearson in terms of getting the course selections for next year, and so that those programs are available for students. That information starts to go out really early. There's a grade 8 parents' night in November. So the programs are under discussion at this time. We don't have details at this time because we are looking at getting input from staff, and staff have just come back as well.
Okay. Follow quick. Yeah. Unless things have changed over the summer, my understanding when the board voted on supporting this recommendation for closure and so on, there's been no commitment by the board to continue any of the OEAP programs that are currently at Bateman. When is the message going to go out to students that are interested in those programs that they're going to be available for them in the future, or discontinued on them midway through their studies?
So this is not a result of the PAR. Annually, school programs looks at regionally OEAP and SHISMs and determines programs at school. So that work is part of an annual process, and that will be communicated probably in the November, when they start to do program selections and the option sheets that are out there. One of the things that is happening right now is Lester B. Pearson and Robinson are hosting a Pathways event in October, and bringing both school communities together to talk about the pathways. We want to ensure that the pathways are there for students. The program locations do change on a regular basis within our board, not frequently, but they do change depending on course enrollment and interest in students. So the program specifically may not move from one school to another. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying it won't. That's something that we look at annually. But that it will be offered. For example, there's 2 transportation SHISMs, one at Bateman and one at Nelson. They're very different programs. So program is working closely with those 2 staffs to start to look at those programs, because it will be integral and part of the architecture design.
Yeah, no, I understand that certain SHISMs are portable.
As well as OEAP. So we have...
But there are some that are strictly facilities-based, and there are no other locations in Halton available to service those students in those particular courses. So if they're coming up with the question, do I go into cosmetology? Do I go into auto body? Do I go into auto paint? At what point can the student make a firm decision that they can take that OEAP and graduate from it in grade 12 without being disconnected partway through?
Well, I think if we give the kids the program and build the program, they'll know. We'll have more. I'm not going to say what programs are going to exist in which schools at this point, because those decisions are being made right now. They're talking about those decisions and making sure that families have the information in a timely manner to make those decisions.
Okay, will there be something communicated to parents?
Absolutely.
On that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Amy. Just want to tag on to that, because I think part of Jason's concern was students that are currently in an OEAP being able to complete the OEAP
qualifications,
or complete the SHISM. So if you could just speak to providing the opportunity for students to complete that which they've already started.
So I will take that to Superintendent Hunt Gibbons, and I'm sure that those discussions have already started. And I'll get back to you and share what the information is. She works closely. We have someone that is actually responsible for OEAP in our board, and she works very closely with that person. So there's some planning that they're looking at right now.
Great, thank you.
Kim?
Yeah, I just have suggestions, and I don't know if it's suggestions for you or suggestions for SEAC at large, but I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is that I just went to the CPP graduation from Milton District recently, and I know that some of the kids, well, all of the kids who graduated this past year had started at EC Drury and made that transition. And I believe the students graduating next year and perhaps the year after have also done that transition. So I guess my advice is that there are people and parents out there and teachers and EAs who have done this transition and can help offer support. And then also looking forward to Milton is going to be building a new school, which will also have a CPP program. So if we can take the learning, all of this learning that we're doing in the Burlington transitions, and also sort of keep that in mind as learning for the new Milton location, that would be helpful. My question is, will there be tours of other facilities, either in Halton greater or wider, and who can be a part of those tours? I was wondering if SEAC could be invited, no matter which integration committee that is. I think that would be great experience for us to see best practices and integrate those. And then before you answer the question, my final comment is just the focus exploration. I would love to see it, the Aldershot one, be something that all students could access and be a part of. And so that's something that I know I will personally be looking for. But yeah, if you could speak to any possible tours, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
So one of the reasons that we have put out to secure an architect at this point is because the architect will be part of the integration processes and getting feedback before. There are ways in which they can get feedback from communities in terms of program, in terms of facilities, so that the design of the school represents the needs of the school. And given it's the composite nature, I'll use Nelson as an example. We also know that there will be some facilities needs at MMR, and we'll be working closely with our architect on that. One of the facilities, it's interesting that you talk about one of the facilities. I spoke with a parent of that has a child in CPP at Robert Bateman over the summer, and she has a child that is now attending camp at Erin Oak, and Erin Oak has just built some really amazing new facilities that are not only close by, but there's one in Brampton as well. So that was something that we had on our radar in terms of a process that we follow. And maybe, Mark, if you want to speak to the facilities tours that you've done in the past to help some of the design that you've worked with.
Sure. So we're always looking at how to provide great design facilities for our programs, because in my 3 now plus years in this department, we have either renovated or built new facilities, specialized facilities for our programs each year, elementary and secondary. So we have looked at other boards and other program facilities elsewhere in the community as well. So, and then we're trying to capture what some of those look like so that the community can see some of that. So I can't remember if I mentioned before here that the renovation that's just finishing up at White Oaks right now for the CPP, we went in and took pictures beforehand because we wanted the community to be able to see this is what we start with, and then we're going to have those pictures then to follow up, so people can see the kind of transformation that can occur with some of this facility work. So that's coming as well.
Any other questions for Terry before we let her go? Yes, Amy.
I didn't want people to forget that Terry's looking for volunteers.
I was just going to say that. So as I said at the beginning of the meeting, there's lots of things happening in our board, and I think it's really important. I know it's really important that SEAC have a representation there. I think that we need to be working and collaborating and advocating, and so it's really important that we have a member of SEAC on this first integration committee. 84 students, but I think you have to keep in mind that we have students at that also have to be prepared to receive the students from Pearson. So from what I could see, once a month, it's not a big, huge time commitment, but it's one way of us making sure that we're advocating for the students that we kind of look after and take care of, et cetera. So I really, it's really important. I understand if you can't step up tonight, but if you could please let me know in the next few days if you're willing to step up for this integration committee so we can make sure that SEAC has a voice as this first integration is being planned. Yes, Tammy.
I saw a bunch of dates across there. Is that a particular day a week, or is it kind of random throughout the month?
They're all Thursdays.
And so I think, and just to highlight what Terry mentioned earlier, that we can certainly, we will bring information regarding this work back to SEAC, and if there are times when we believe we need Terry's in-depth knowledge of this and the opportunity for feedback, through some of the breakouts that we've done in the gallery in the past, we may come back for those kinds of opportunities and opportunities for questions. So that'll be sort of a moving part of the agenda throughout the year.
Yes, Amy.
Just wanted to remind trustees too that 3 of the trustees that are on this integration committee also sit on SEAC. So we will be able to bring information from the committees as well. But we don't want to be the representatives from SEAC because we are the trustee representatives and we really need SEAC there.
Yeah, agreed. One of the things Terry and I talked about when we met in the summer was we talked about setting up a regular cadence of having Terry come, but we didn't think monthly was really needed, and so that's kind of why we're going to leave it a little ad hoc. If at any time you are talking to your families, you are out with people in the community and you have any questions, I know Terry is more than open to be able to answer those questions. As we said, communication is a really key piece here. This transition, this whole process has been very emotional and very difficult for the community. So I think, again, as SEAC and we're out there in the communities talking to families, that it's really important that we bring the feedback back into Terry, into the integration committee, so we can make sure that nothing is falling through the cracks, that we're covering everything. And I think, there's opportunities to be able to learn from transitions. Yes, we want to learn from transitions that went well, but we have lots of examples of transitions that didn't go as well. And I think that there's opportunity to learn from some of those as well. So to make sure that we're learning from both, getting some lessons learned from poorer transitions. Any other questions for Terry? Otherwise, I'm going to let her go. All right. Thank you very much for coming out and talking to us and updating us on this progress.
Thank you.
So we're going to do a little bit of flipping of agenda, and we're going to flip the special education review update ahead of the special needs strategy. So Mark, want to take that piece?
Thank you. So you will recall that the special education review did a lot of work through last year and provided a lot of information that came here. We had a lot of discussion about that with a commitment to look at continuing the review with the support of trustees. And so that trustees spoke strongly about that, of wanting to continue the work. We talked about having a good baseline of information that was established in the first part of the review, but that would need to dig deeper. So an update for you tonight is that number one, our 2 consultants that we had for the first part, when you met those gentlemen here last year and we had the opportunity to participate in the focus group, are not able to continue because of other commitments. They're quite involved in a number of other reviews and work, and so they couldn't continue. So we went looking for other consultants or consultant to continue this work, and we're very fortunate to find Alana Gray. And Alana is sitting beside Jane there. I asked her to come just tonight, just so you could put a face to a name, And Alana has quite an extensive background, experience and training in conducting review work. She's done work for a number of organizations, but also for a period of time worked for the Peel District School Board in their research department, doing a variety of review work there as well. So brings a lot of experience in reviews in general, but also specific to education. So Alana is sort of part-time in our department on contract for the next few months. Has begun already in terms of some of the background and gathering other information, and is awaiting a reconvening of the steering committee. You recall that we have a steering committee that's helped guide the work of the review. That committee is coming back together again next week, and we are, yes. And so I'll have a chance to meet with the steering committee and talk about what those directions look like. So that's basically the update of how that's moving forward. And the intent, again, is any recommendations that would come forward would do so in time to be supported, if need be, through the budget and staffing process. So recommendations would come forward January, February, in order to be in sync. Once again, if there are recommendations that are need that kind of support to go forward. Any questions, comments? I know it's pretty high level, but we don't have detail, obviously, at this point. No? Thank you. We switched those, Lana, because I didn't want you to have to sit through more. If you'd like to stay, you're welcome, but Jane, you don't have a choice.
You're stuck here, Jane. I'm sorry. All right, thank you. So the next piece that we have to update is the special needs strategy from the province.
So I meant to send you earlier, and I realized I hadn't sent to you tonight a memo from the ministry, and so that was sent to you in the last sometime, in the last whatever period of time, 15 minutes. Suzanne has forwarded that. So if you're in your email, you'll see that memo from the province. And so just to touch back a bit on the special needs strategy, because I know we haven't talked about it here for a while. If you recall, we had two consultants from that work, specifically around the integrated rehab portion of the special needs strategy. We had two consultants from that, I think 2 years ago now, I want to say. They came and did a presentation. I don't know if you remember that, but that's this has been going on for 3 years, if you're wondering. This has been a long go that we've been working at the special needs strategy. And the intent, the focus has been to come up with a regional design for the delivery of services. And the intent being that it was a smooth, integrated service for students for children from birth to 21, right? That families would have access to those services, that they would have the multiple access points. They could access those services through a community provider or through the school board or through childcare, whichever. And that was the intent, that there'd be a free flow of information, obviously with parental consent, shared information system. All these things were part of the intent of the ministry. And that the design could be specific to that area. So if we in Halton came up with a design for that service model that would differed from Peel or from Hamilton, the ministries, I'll say, were fine with that. It was Ministry of Ed, Children and Youth, Community Services, and Health. 4 ministries involved in this strategy. So we've been working at this. I've been going to meetings almost monthly for 2.5 years on this, meeting with all of our community partners, as of other staff in other subgroups, et cetera, of this. And we submitted a proposal at least a year ago to the ministry for what our structure and design was for Halton. That those all went into the ministry. Some areas, because we were divided into a number of areas in the province, were able to work really well together, all the community partners, and develop a proposal, and in it went. Others really struggled within their communities to come to an agreement for what that would look like. And a challenge throughout all of it has been the French boards, because it's hard to have a model that fits, for example, in Halton. Let's say, for example, we're talking about the delivery of speech-language services in Halton, and we say, yeah, this is a good model that works, that involves public board, Catholic board, community care and treatment centers, et cetera. If all that works well, it was hard to make that same model work for the, let's say, the French Catholic board, and when that board extends from Kingston to Windsor, right? It's a very different geographic reality for them. So those were a struggle all through this design process. So the memo that you see from the ministry, because they asked us, they said, okay, during September, we want you now to share all this with and the design for your area with your stakeholder groups, SEAC, community agencies, union groups involved. We wanted you to go out and share that during the month of September. And the ministry was to provide what they called a program guide that would say, here are the elements that everyone should fit within as this moves forward. We waited and waited, no program guide came, no word on funding, and then last week this memo showed up. And so last week or the week before, this memo came saying, this is now all on hold. So this is where we're at, and if you read into the detail of the memo, it says that there will now be a provincial group that looks at this model, potentially to create a provincial model as opposed to one that's locally developed and specific to each area. So they have an expert committee coming together to do this work. It's been a bit frustrating in terms of, you can imagine the time that we've put in as a community of community agencies and boards. It's a bit frustrating in terms of the time that we've put in. I get the ministry's intent about trying to allow for local design, but at the same time, when they said this would happen and would be supported throughout the province, there were a lot of questions about whether that could happen. So where they're going to land, I really couldn't tell you. The one thing that is outlined in this memo and ties into, there's a question from the member of the public, which maybe we can address at the same time, it's on this topic, is about a transition of the provision of service from the CCACs to the community service providers. So if you're aware, the CCACs have been dissolved in the province, and all of that service has been taken on by the LINs. And now there's another link to that story, but I'll leave that. So so now what this memo is saying is that by April 1st, all of that service provision has to move over to the community agency, and it varies by community who provides that service. So in Halton, most of that service is provided by Erin Oak. So the funding is to move over to Erin Oak, and the provision of service, I don't know anything more than the memo says. So the memo, the language here Yeah, it doesn't say a lot. It says, we ask that the CTCs, that's for us, that's the Erin Oak, and the LINs, work with the existing service providers to plan the transition of contracts from the LINs to the CTCs and for implementation on April 1st, 2018. The ministries will work closely with the CTCs and the LINs to support a smooth transition for the contracted service providers, for the contracted service providers impacted by the shift in contract responsibility. Because if you're aware, CCACs don't have their own staff that provide nursing care and speech support, et cetera. That's all contracted out, right? That's how they operate. So that service is supposed to now move over to Erin Oak. And then there's some discussion, we can see some smooth transition in terms of the providers themselves, and to maintain service continuity for children and their families who are receiving or waiting for these services. And we'll be kept informed what this looks like. That's what it says. That's all we know. And like I said, this memo just arrived in the last week. So lots has to happen in order to make this happen well. We know that the ministries all want to see this happen well. They want families not to experience any disruption in service for all this to all go smoothly. How and what this will look like, we don't know yet, but we'll certainly keep you apprised as we learn more. So that's where we're at with the special needs strategy. There's one other part to this that doesn't get a lot of airtime because it's a much smaller part, and that is the service coordination. So if you recall back, there are two parts to the special needs strategy. One is integrated rehab, which is what we've been talking about now in terms of speech, OT, PT, all those things. And the other is service coordination. And the service coordination side of things is for children with complex needs. So not the student with a singular diagnosis but ones that present with complex needs and require the coordination of varieties of services within the community. That work has also been occurring, and that's about how we do that better as a community of all the service providers and school boards. The number of students for us that it actually affects would be pretty few that have that level of complexity. There's already service coordination that goes on in our community, and to be honest, our staff have done a lot of that for years. Our social workers and other staff have done those kinds of things for years. So that is still continuing and is unaffected by this. But once again, it's a much smaller piece of this. The big chunk of work is the integrated rehab. So I'll leave it at that. And Sophia, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so just to be clear, because this memo is very cloudy, it's not very clear.
Yeah.
CCAC will continue to provide services. Oh, they will not be providing service at all. So what's happening April 1st?
So already if you haven't felt this part of it as a family, if you're receiving service, the CCACs already don't exist. Okay, and so that service and those staff, all that has shifted over to the LIN, right? The local integrated health network. So the LINs have the funding had already shifted to the LINs, and therefore the LIN has administered those contracts for the providers that work with students, with children. So that has been going on already. And if you haven't felt any difference, good. That's the intent, right? That it's well, because really I'm only saying that because the CCACs are no longer, right? So now, but they've continued on. So ideally, if you wouldn't have noticed any difference, because here I am, a speech path working with your child. The money used to get funneled through this organization called the Community Care Access Center, and I got paid to do your service. That organization is gone. The province dissolved it. The money shifted over to the LIN. but I continue to deliver the service. I continue to get paid to do that. That's the intent. So now the transition that's going to happen next is now the LHINs won't necessarily work with those contracted providers. They might. That's the part that's unclear here. Or will they all become Erin Oak staff? Will the Erin Oak do all this hiring to provide all this? Or will they do contracting out? That's the part that's unclear.
Yeah. So I think certs at the school are also a bit confused because we sat down and talked about, okay, what is speech going to look like? What's OT going to look like? What's PT? And they don't really know what to say.
And because as you can tell from the memo, we don't have a lot to tell them. So
is service, do we
right
consider
now
service suspended at the moment, or wait
no,
for them to
everything is status quo. Service all continues. Nothing is different there. Okay. But what this will look like on April 1st, stay tuned.
Okay. But from now until April 1st, nothing should really be just.
As I know,
it's hard to. I want to go back and tell the certs at my son's school because they're also confused. Nobody knows anything really. So
there's change that's been going on, hasn't necessarily been impactful out there, which is a good thing.
But we don't know yet because it's
this is honestly has been a moving target. This is the latest change. We've had changes coming at us for the last 2.5 years, 3 years about this, that is different than the original intent and messaging from the ministries. So, and to be honest, a number of deadlines that they've either said imposed on us or have put on themselves have been moving. So I wouldn't bet money that this April 1st date is going to stick because there's a long track record of the dates not sticking. I'm just telling you what the reality's been.
Jason and then Melissa.
Yeah, sorry, this question may be just a little bit off center or whatever, but I understand the CCAC model, that it doesn't exist anymore, and then I sort of get the LHIN model. But what is Erin Oak as a business entity? Are they a privately run not-for-profit? Because they're not a government agency. Do you know that? Or is that, I mean, that's something I'd probably find out, but.
Yeah, I don't know that. Does anybody know? Some help from the gallery?
On a not-for-profit basis, I assume. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the help.
Melissa?
Got it working. So I think the thing for me in terms of the perspective is, as a school board, a lot of services are provided at actually Erin Oak facilities. And if that's going to transition, that was always the parent concern, I think, is that from 0 to 5, they had a lot of therapy where you would take your child to the Erin Oak facility and you would have lots of therapy and OT, PT in these rooms with lots of equipment. And as they transitioned to schools, it was very ad hoc. It was the OT, PT coming maybe once every 3 months and instructing an EA on some exercises and some things to do. And they would order equipment and things like that. But in terms of facility, I don't know that the schools it's going to be a huge undertaking if the schools are going to take on this responsibility of creating these environments where they can provide decent OT and PT. And, we're talking about even, with Bateman and everything, OT is very important. We need a kitchen. We need we need these kids to learn how to toilet. We need these kids to learn how to use the, telephone. We need all these things. And having it go to Erin Oak, this brand new facility right near the hospital, it's beautiful and it's great. But I see there's going to be a huge gap between the beautiful facilities the kids have from 0 to 5. And then as they enter school, it'll be whatever the OT is expected to lug in her car to bring to the school and then take it away. And it won't have that same continuity. So I'm just, as from your perspective, are the school boards prepared to match that? Does the government think they're going to put money into the schools? Because it's fine and well to say that Erin Oak is going to be the sole provider of OT-PT, but doing it in a different site other than the $100 million facilities they've now built in the Halton region, I don't know.
Great question. Once again, it's been a moving target. So we, in our Halton discussions, talked about the value of that seamless delivery of service, and that it would be where the child and family needed it, right? Mm-hmm. We put a lot of value in that. And so our intent was that those professionals would come into the school, provide that service. The degree to which the facility would be enhanced or not, that was all dependent on funding. Mm-hmm. And then what service looked like at home and different times of the year and day, all that was part of what we wanted to see happen. Mm-hmm. Will it happen?
I just feel that there's this brand new state-of-the-art facility built there. I just don't my advice as a parent would be, and as a teacher, frankly, is to make use of transportation. I know transportation is always an issue, but during the day, it's very difficult for parents, especially, working parents, to get their kid home from school, off the bus at 4:30, and then go and do an additional physio appointment. So somehow coordinating that, where any transportation during the day could take the child to the facility, whether that's, with maybe not necessarily with an EA, depending on the status of the child or group or whatever, but using those state-of-the-art facilities instead of, ad hoc putting, different things in the variety of different sites where all the students are, like having a group, a social skills group for kids with severe ASD meet there, Wednesday afternoons or that sort of thing. It just seems more financially feasible than trying to disperse it out everywhere else. But I'm sure there's it all depends on money. But I would say for me as a parent, that's a really difficult thing. Once my child entered school, there wasn't the time to go to physio. When they're at school for 6, 7, when you take a bus, it's 7 hours of the day they're exhausted. So to then pack them in the car and then go do a physio session or a speech session, that's a really difficult undertaking. And I think there's the potential there to kind of kill two birds with one stone, I would say.
And so I'll remind you that the ministries said from the very beginning, no additional funding. So whatever design we came up with, there was no additional money. We had to make it work with the funding that exists. So you can imagine what we'd like to do and what we can do and what maybe with the actual outcome is challenging when the dollars aren't changing.
Any other? Yes, Kim.
So, yeah, in reading that paragraph, it's almost contradictory, right? The steering committee should cease final proposal development and then work together to implement something for April 1st in the very next sentence, right? Would it? Could you explain who's on the steering committees, and then could they just keep going to help out? Not that I don't have trust in the ministry and having all their ducks in a row by April 1st, but as a backup plan?
Great question, and it actually lines up quite well with our thinking because we actually have a few committees operating. There's a management team. Sorry, we had a proposal development committee to start, and then once we submitted our proposal, because remember we got ours done in Halton, right? So then it went to the ministry. Then we looked at, okay, now we have to get this up and running. So we had a management team, which the agencies are basically the same on each. So the two boards, Erin Oak, the region of Halton, CCAC, the Catholic boards. Am I missing somebody? I don't think so. So we had a management committee, and then we had an operations committee. I'm sorry, I'll step back. On the development committee, there was a much larger group because we had, if you think about the smaller community agencies, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. So there's some smaller ones that provide respite care, for example, for students and families, and smaller providers of different therapies, etc. We had everybody, CAS, all at the table in that proposal development. And then when we got down to, okay, so now who's going to be providing the service? It's these large core organizations. That's who's on these two now committees going forward. So on the management level is, myself, my colleague from the Catholic Board, the director of Aaron Oak is there, et cetera. So we have a management level at that level, and then the operations piece. We had a senior manager from Halton, likewise from the Catholic Board, et cetera, all working on the on-the-ground work, right? So through that, we said, you know what? Whether this goes on or not, there's a lot of great work that we can do through these relationships and the work that we've been talking about. So we sort of made a commitment that if none of this happens, we're still going to work on better providing service, making sure it's seamless, great communication, trying to get away from you're on one wait list, now you have to get on another wait list, all that kind of thing, that sort of the intent of the strategy. We made a commitment that we want to try and do that work anyway. So obviously it's harder if we don't have the ministries coming together to work through things like legislation that makes it challenging, or funding issues, et cetera. That would be certainly more helpful, but we see value in the work anyway.
So Mark, I have a question. This refers specifically to OT, PT, and SLP. But does that also include, because if I look at an IBI situation, where again, a student from 0 to 5 has had this IBI happening with their agency, and now they enter into school, and so we have a potential disruption of service. I know we've had this conversation, but it seems to me that it falls along the similar pathway, that if we are bringing OT and PT and SLP into the schools through these agencies, shouldn't we be able to do the same with our IBI? I'm not going to lump ABA into that because I know we have trainers and facilitators, but we don't have that expertise at the board to provide that. And some of these students who are coming into the kindergarten program need that. So I guess if we're saying we can allow it for these therapies, why can we not allow it for other therapies?
So the mandate from the ministry going back 3 years is that these are the services we're talking about. Because there are others like nursing care and other things that music therapy you can go on about the other services that are out there for our students. But the ministry was clear, these are the things we're talking about. So in integrated rehab, it's OT, PT, and speech. So that's been our mandate, and that's what we've been focusing on. Could some of this work, or where we take this, be extended to other types of supports? Possibly. That'd be too early for me to say anything more than that. Plus, if we're doing this together as agencies within the community, I think I'd be undermining my colleagues and the other agencies to say otherwise. So, but is it a possibility? Sure. And there was a question from our helper in the gallery. Great question, thank you. And so I was remiss in saying who were the members on our that initial design committee, that proposal committee. We had parents on that. So just so you know, there was 2 parents who had great input at that point. In terms of these committees, we don't have parents on them right now. We have had parent input earlier, not beyond just those 2 parents, but we have had community surveys go out. We have had focus groups happening One of them happened here, but in other forums as well that involve parents. So there was input then. Going forward, yes, we have been talking about what parent voice would look like. And we thought that now isn't the time because it's just so nebulous about what's going to happen. But once we get to a more concrete stage of what that should look like, the group said absolutely we need parent voice. So yes, that is our intent.
Any other questions for Mark? All right. I know we had one question from the public, which we kind of addressed in Mark's special needs strategy.
Did that answer your question? That's here? Okay.
I don't think there's any more on the papers back there. No. So that would move us into the SEAC discussion and question period. Yes, Sherry.
Okay, thanks. So we've had several examples recently this year of families who have been dissatisfied with the process of going through SRT and IPRC. They've been dissatisfied in a number of ways. Number one, they're not being encouraged to attend. Number two, they're not feeling as though the process is objective about the options for student placement. And number three, we are hearing comments that are made by CERTs and at IPRC by staff that are not showing a correct understanding of the needs of children who are identified as gifted. So my questions, I have three questions. Number one, I have questions if other associations are hearing similar kinds of feedback from families. My second question is, what training do staff who oversee the IPRC process have regarding each and every exceptionality, and I'm particularly interested in giftedness, but I'm concerned about all of them. And third, how do we assess and train these folks to ensure proper knowledge of these exceptionalities?
So I think your first question to the other members. So I think your question was, are other...
Yeah, are other associations hearing similar feedback from families about families not getting invited, not feeling as though their needs are being heard, as though IPRC is not being objective, if they're being strong-armed into one way or the other, just things like that.
Yes, I have heard from parents that they are not openly invited to SRT meetings unless they request to be there. I have heard that a parent, how do I put this? I've heard that a parent had a request to move forward to IPRC turned down. And when I asked the parent if they had a copy of the regulation 181/98, they did not have.
Yep, Sophia.
So unfortunately, I have to echo the same sentiments. We've had several families approach me and talk about similar issues, not being invited, being discouraged that, it's not typical for parents to come out, it's sort of standard procedure, especially if someone doesn't have an education background, and it's their first child. Oftentimes they'll just sort of go with the flow, and not until they talk to other parents do they realize that they should be at the table, and similar things.
I'll just add to that a little bit from the gifted perspective. Just to say, I think on all the exceptionalities, I think a better job has to be done by the teaching staff to indicate whether this is a transition meeting or a placement meeting. I think there's a big difference between transition meetings, if the transition is already there, particularly for gifted kids. The transition from, say, a primary gifted to an intermediate gifted is literally a movement from one place to another. If there's a different school location, then certainly there's need for input. So I'm curious if a little bit of the discrepancy is in fact on identification or transitions, because I would, just from my own perspective as a teacher of the gifted for several years, I think there's a big difference between those two, and I think staff maybe encourage parents a little bit differently, depending on what type of meeting it is.
Yeah, so the group of examples that I've had over the summer have all been around identification and placement, not around transition. There may be those issues, but those aren't the ones that I've heard.
Jason, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. A few years back, and I don't recall exactly how long ago it was now, we used to have regular parent information nights, coffee chat sessions, and that sort of thing. And it was a certainty that every chance or opportunity we had to speak with parents, there was at least half a dozen in every group that were just completely overwhelmed with the initial diagnosis. How is the school board helping me? Why are they not telling me what's going on? How do I find out what's going on? And then other parents having concerns, they moved, and what's the transition plan? And really felt that they were not openly welcomed or even encouraged to attend the IPRC and SRT meetings, and really felt that it was all a very arm's length, this is all you need to know on this sheet of paper kind of approach, rather than a dialogue between parents and teachers.
So it's not just me. So, but I guess back to my, questions then to you. So, the first question was answered that this isn't an issue that I'm just hearing about, so we're all hearing about it. So I think we need to address that from some kind of communication and training perspective for all certs in all schools to help do a better job of making sure that parents understand what their rights are and what they should do, and that we should not be telling customers, parents, it's okay, don't worry, you don't have to come, I'll take care of it for you. That's what we hear all the time. So I think we need to fix that. And then my other questions are around the people who are overseeing the process. And my questions are, again, what training do they have? These people who are over, I don't know who they are. I don't know if they are specialists in special education. I don't know if they're principals who are just sitting in. We know that principals don't even have to have special education one to be there. So I'm wondering, what training do they have? How do they know about every exceptionality? And then, how do we assess them, and how do we go forward and train them to make sure that some of the things that we're hearing are corrected?
Great questions. So first, I'll start. Maybe Jane, I might ask you to chime in at one point, because Jane has a lot of detailed expertise here. That we continually message, and I'm not saying it's not enough, because there are some concerns that we're hearing tonight, but we continually message staff that parents should be well informed about all the pieces. Jason did a nice job of highlighting some of how this can come at parents pretty quickly, right? In terms of diagnosis, before that was all the challenges their child was having, and those difficulties, and then assessments and diagnoses come at them, and then what does this look like around identifications and processes and all that. So that can be pretty overwhelming for sure. And you add to that for some parents who may have some learning needs themselves in terms of understanding all of this. And then we also have parents with English as a second language needs that, it's a growing need within Halton. So yeah, all that can be very unnerving and confusing, etc., and anxiety that comes with that. So we're very sensitive to that. So our messaging to staff has continually been that we want parents to be well informed, really understand what's happening, what's coming, and lots of opportunities for questions and support, and that the process of school resource team, SRT, and the IPRC, that process is that they're invited to come, they understand what's going to go on at those committees, why they should attend. That, you know, we continually ask that information to be out there through our staff. So that comes through training and messaging we do with administrators and also with our CERTs. We do regular CERT networking where through those networks is where all that messaging comes. And that's happens every year. So, I don't know, Jane, do you want to add anything to that? Yeah.
I'm just going to repeat that because we're being recorded. And I don't know if everybody heard. So you have 2 sessions coming up where the CERT networking, where we can get this message out, correct?
One, our CERT networking that Mark talked to you about that happens throughout the year, the first meeting is coming up.
Okay. End of September, beginning October for the first CERT meeting. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So I appreciate you bringing this tonight because we need to hear those stories, that this is continues to be not as well done as we'd like. I think schools try to present an understanding of, for some, because for example, for some parents, they might be taking a half a day or a day off of work to attend. And we have had some parents say, okay, so I took the day off work to show up and for the committee to say, yes, we support the identification and placement of your child. Do you have any questions or comments? No. Great, thanks for coming. And it's really not much longer than that after the school's presentation. So we have had some parents who say, okay, if I'm going to take this time, and for some of our parents, time off work is time not getting paid, right? If they don't go to work that day. So I think the schools try to present a clear picture of what will that time look like, and the most, I guess, the anticipated outcome of them going to IPRC. And I don't have a number, but the vast majority of I'm drawing a blank on the word, recommendations that come to IPRC are approved, are supported. I don't know what, I'd say it's in the 90 whatever percent, is the vast majority are supported. So that means for the vast majority of parents, they're not coming with the anticipation that, okay, this might go, what's being requested or presented, the recommendation, may not happen. So I think that schools are trying to be clear on what that time might look like and what the process, et cetera, might look like. So for some, might that sound like, oh, you don't have to bother coming because this is what it's going to look like? I can understand for some that might be what it looks like. We don't want that to be the intent of schools, that they say they're trying to dissuade the parent from coming for these reasons. We want all parents to feel welcome, and that for them to come and listen or present, more perspective on the child so that the committee really understands. Fabulous. We want that to happen. But not the other side where parents say, I took a day off work for that. So we'll certainly continue, and obviously we have to work on our messaging because what we've been doing so far isn't always working, right? So I'll make that statement first around what you've said. Your other questions around training. So Jane's talked about some of that training. There's quite a bit of training offered throughout the course of the year, not just on gifted, but on all exceptionalities. The sort of, if you want to call it, where we try to capture everyone is mostly in the CERT networking. We also have networks for the teachers of the various self-contained classes. So there's a LD teacher network and a BRC teacher network, et cetera. So those networks all occur at elementary and secondary. And then we also have opportunities through the year where we present to administrators. So one example is the Family of Schools meetings, which happen every month. In each area of the board, all admin come. I think we're on the October agenda, special education, and so we have time to address a number of topics on that agenda. So depending on the year and what's going on, we choose our topics. So those opportunities are there. Plus, there's a variety of memos and messages that go out. I think we've sent out half a dozen already this year, just in the last, 5 days of school on a variety of topics. So information goes out that way as well. So there's quite a bit that happens. I don't know if you want to add to any of that, Jane.
Sorry, Jane, can you come to the mic? Sorry. Yeah, that's what we were just talking about, is that when we call another staff, we're going to have them come to the mic now.
So we do training for the IPRC committees through meeting. I'm concerned about calling it training. There's not a certification or anything like that. I just want to be sure. And that involves process, that involves, what does 18198 say us? What are our legal obligations as members of the RPRC committee? We review what is the composition of our self-contained classes, what are the profiles of the classes. We review and work on what are guiding questions, what would we expect from a good IPRC presentation, what do we need to know. All of those pieces are components of our work together. And then I was saying that our coordinator of the IPRC process builds the IPRC committee quite thoughtfully, and when new members are brought on to the IPRC committee, they come on as members, IPRC members. The chair is a more experienced person who's been on the IPRC committee more than 1 year, and the superintendent designate continues to be, and I pulled up just to make sure I wasn't telling fibs, they are all people who do have special ed qualifications, either the AQ, the special ed part 1 minimum, or they have the AQ, which is called Special Education for Administrators. So those are the superintendent designates. And then we've had a senior manager of the professional support services who has, in the last several years, been a member of the College of Psychologists, who are also, of course, lend a lot of expertise in relation to students with specific diagnoses and profiles.
So do we have an opportunity to look at some of the training that you've talked about, that Mark's talked about, et cetera? I mean, some of the comments that we're hearing from families, that things that people are saying at IPRC are particularly distressing to me, because it shows a complete lack of understanding of what a profile of a child who may be identified gifted, who wants to go to a self-contained, and the comments we're hearing back just show a complete lack of understanding of what's going on. So, can we, for example, ABC, look at the training that you're delivering on behalf of gifted? And I don't know if the other associations want to look at that as well, but I'm concerned, and I would like to see it and see if perhaps it needs to be updated or offer some input or something, because there's definitely something wrong with what the feedback we're hearing.
I guess I'd like to, and probably not tonight isn't the place, but I'd like you to, when you say something's wrong, I'd like to hear from you in more detail. Well, more than just one example. I'd like to have a good discussion to understand that with you. To hear what you're hearing, and I think that would be really helpful for us to hear. So. And so I think a good connection here is a question from the gallery here around. I was thinking this earlier about the Working Together booklet. So because it really lays out that process quite clearly, at least I think quite clearly. That document is there for parents, but the question is around when they receive it. So do they receive it before their child goes to SRT? And I think we've had this question before. And Jane, do you recall, and maybe you need to not sit there, but because a lot of the information there is about SRT and then about IPRC, et cetera. So remind me, when do we give parents the Working Together booklet? Or I guess we've been giving them the link more recently, right, as well.
And we've been encouraging school teams to give them to parents at the onset of known needs, where we're starting that conversation about the problem-solving pathway. So it can be earlier than that first SRT, when we're starting to problem solve with the classroom teacher to start that. But minimally, it's at that first SRT.
But so I want to kind of echo on what Sherry's saying. Is it's one thing to get a document, and it's one thing to know that that's your right. But when you have 4 or 5 board staff standing and you're a parent and you are asking to go and you're basically being told it's really not necessary, you're not being encouraged to go. And as a parent, if you are not, I'm trying to think of the right words, assertive, if you're not comfortable enough to say, no, this is my child, I am going. It is very easy for many of these parents who are tired, who are dealing with so much, to say, I'm going to trust you that you're going to do it. And I've seen it. I've been working with families who I've gone to them to SRT meetings because they just don't know. So I think that it almost needs to be a culture change. And I don't think it's just gifted, that it needs to be a recognition that these parents are a member of the education team, that what happens in the school impacts what happens at home and vice versa. And I think that truly is part of the breakdown, is that in some environments, the team is great, and in other environments, it's not so great. So that's just the way I see it and the people I'm talking to, and I see a lot of hands up. I'm going to start Amy, Jason, and Lou. Oh, Dawn you're right. I did write it down. So Dawn, Amy, Jason, Lou, and Kim.
Okay, so what I like to see is the emphasis that the parents know when they're going into the meeting what's going to be discussed with regards to whether it be an identification or a placement recommendation, so that they don't get blindsided. Because if they go in there and all of a sudden it's, this is your child's identification, but we recommend them to stay in their home school, when the parent thought, after they've gone and seen another school and seen the program and gone, that fits my kid. Just so they're ready to make an articulate response, because when you're standing there and yeah, you've just been introduced to 5 or 6 people and you're just going, it's difficult.
If I could just respond to that. So I've sat on many an IPRC, both back when I was a principal and in this role. And so maybe parents are hiding it really well, but I've had lots of parents come and I've at least never had anyone said, oh my gosh, that wasn't what.
So I don't think
the school is saying something different than I thought. So when you say blindsided, I guess it could be, but I've never had anyone come afterwards and say the school said something different than because the decision, the recommendation comes from SRT. So that's where that conversation is going on. And sometimes not a discouragement to go to IPRC, but parents are told, I think quite rightly, the in-depth discussion about your child and all the detail about their profile, their needs, what programming might look like, and things like an identification or an alternate placement, all of that detailed conversation happens at SRT. And
yes,
yeah, and you're right. Right.
If they missed out on the SRT or were told, oh, it's only going to take 5 minutes, don't bother. Although I hear that 5-minute comment more for the IPRC. But yeah, if they weren't at the table at that first one, they don't necessarily know exactly what's going to be recommended at IPRC. So that's just what I've heard from parents.
Yeah, fair enough.
Amy?
My experience at SRT, I've been asked to go with parents. I've been SRT as a parent. It is very intimidating unless you know the people around the table really well. And there can be 8, 9 people that you don't know telling you what's best for your child, and you're still at that point of not understanding what your child needs. It is a scary process. And that's why a lot of people have asked for me or someone else to go with them. They want someone in there to sit with them, to hold their hand, to make sure that they're asking the questions that need to be asked. And I think that was part of the reason why 2 years ago, when we rewrote a significant rewrite of the Spec Ed plan, we changed the chart to include that parent piece in there. I think perhaps some of our certs or admins have not really looked at the new chart and realizing that the parents' involvement in what's happening with their child is huge, because if the parent's not comfortable, the child's going to feel it. And we want for the children to reap the benefits of having been to SRT and IPRC and having an IEP and all of these other wonderful acronyms. We want the parents to feel as comfortable as possible and as part of a team as possible. And that isn't always easily accomplished. It might be worth the while to perhaps tell them that they can invite a friend to come with them, so that they're not the only one at the table that like they don't feel alone. I don't know.
Jason?
Yeah, really, and this unintentionally fits along with exactly what Amy was saying, is that I know from my own experience and parents that I've spoken to, and having worked in the technology field for, let's say more than 5 years, you have a language that you use when you're talking with your own people that don't make any sense outside of that circle. I can sit there with the other propeller heads and we can talk about this, that, or the other stuff. But when a manager or an executive director comes in and wants to know the status of a project, you can't just say, wow, we're having trouble with table index blah crap. They have no idea what you're talking about. You go into an IPRC meeting, everyone's introduced by the acronym of what they do. So you have a SRT itinerant who sounds like she must be unemployed, because that's normally what itinerant means. You have an IPRC coordinator who's not really in charge, and you have this and that, and so you don't even know who anybody is. And then it's names and it's numbers, and even the names used, and I realize this is out of scope for the board, but for the diagnoses themselves. Mild intellectual disability. Most people you work with have some form of mild intellectual disability, and I'm sure you've met plenty of them. But the older term of mentally retarded, developmentally delayed has been softened, so now it sounds like, no, have you met my child? He's beyond mild intellectual disability kind of thing, and that's what's going through your head when you hear people talk about these things. And I know from sitting in some of these myself, your head is spinning with all this, trying to figure out, how do I take these terms and this jargon and apply it to what's going on in my life? And then the meeting's over by the time you put the first couple of pieces together. And you're asked, are there any questions? Say, yeah, let's start over again, and let's do this in a language that I understand and can ask you questions about. And I think that's the biggest issue that I've had. Most parents that have spoken to me about it is that they don't even really quite understand the terminology being used. So it's like going into a court of law and the judge asks you if you have a question, and you think, I don't know what terms you're using here. It does not make sense to me. So I think there's a lot of room to make the IPRC process friendlier by trying to use language that is readily understandable by people outside of the special education community.
Lou?
I think that what I'm hearing is that the parents want to have a say, but really they are there to comment on what basically has already been decided. And we have to come up with a way to involve the parents so that they can better understand. Like, I don't think that talking if I had to take a day off work to go to something that was over in 5 minutes and I didn't quite know what it was about, and certainly it's not making any sense to me, I would get frustrated at the process. Not necessarily that I didn't think that my child was in the right place, but just that it just seemed like all too much. So we have to come up with a way to make the parents feel that we want to hear about their child. And if the process where they're meant to do that is too complicated, then we are failing, not them. And I think that is at the crux of it, and we must really look at what we can do there. So perhaps even if it's a case of sending out information or involving the groups or something to help them fill out the forms, just to add an extra step in the process right at the beginning, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm here as a member at large, but out any specific, leaning towards anything. And just from what I'm hearing, that seems to make sense to me. Thank you.
Kim, and then Melissa.
Thank you. I can, from personal experience, echo a lot of the comments, especially what Jason was saying in terms of not only are you meeting new people, but they're people with fancy titles too, right? Like, you're meeting with the principal and a psychologist and maybe assistant principal from the board, and it's a bit overwhelming. But I do see areas where we can improve maybe on communication, and we've got a board of trustees who has been very supportive of improved communications, and perhaps this is an area that we may wish to look at as a group, because I'm thinking of just even simple things that could have been done, like when you're sitting in the hallway waiting for your SRT meeting, maybe you're given a list a piece of paper with a list of the people who are going to be in that meeting, and maybe on the back of that is an overview of what an SRT meeting is, and or maybe there's a hard copy of that book that's there. So that's just something, perhaps, I know there's some trustees in the audience here too, that perhaps something we can think about. And then I'm looking at the document, the working together document, under school resource team. If anyone has it open, it's on page 4. It says SRT membership, and for elementary it says principal, vice principal, or designate as the first one, and then special education resource teachers. And then it says may include classroom teachers, psychic consultant, parents, students. So parents is part of the may include. I'm wondering if perhaps in our document we might want to move parents up so that they're part of that core group with, in brackets, it's their choice, right? It's the parents' choice whether or not to come. It's not the decision of the people putting the SRT membership. Even though I know in the paragraph earlier on that page, it says that you're encouraged to go. So that maybe that's just a little thing. And then maybe it's just as simple as some messaging to staff that to be very frank about what it is, and perhaps in something like what we've done with encouraging students to walk to school. So we're doing the maps of the schools, and it's all very clear. This document is like 21 pages long. Maybe we just need a really good visual map with some definitions just to get people started. So anyway, I know there's a lot of ideas in there, but yeah, the communication is perhaps the crux of the issue.
So once again, thank you for all these perspectives. These are really, and I know you still want to add in, but I'm jumping in, I'm sorry. This is good for us to hear because obviously there's still work to be done. I also know that I don't think we have to go too far for a lot of what you're asking about, because I know for an absolute fact many of the things that you're expressing concerns about are done really well every day across our system. And we could bring out those examples as well. And my intent of saying that isn't to say, to discount what you're saying. That's not my intent. My intent is to say we do this really well in a variety of ways, so we can draw upon what those practices are in our schools. Because I know of CERTs who sit down and spend a lot of time with parents and explain all of the things that you're talking about. And I've sat in SRTs where things are really well laid out and parents really made to feel at ease. And I've sat in IPRCs where all those same things happen. And at least my impression is that parents really come away feeling involved, well-informed, having a voice, and that we do those things well. So I think there's lots of practices that we can draw upon in our system to articulate this. I was planning to bring next month to CCAC, but we can talk about it now, is our intent to look at this year is to work at revising the Working Together document. It's been something I've wanted to do for a while, but we've had a few reviews on our plate that we've had to work through, and that's taken a fair bit of our time. But those are, if we were able to wrap all those up last year, and so now we have some more time in the department, and so I'd really like us to see us engage in that. So we're going to be coming to you with a bit of our intent around that next month, and certainly looking for SEAC involvement. So I know the last time this revision happened, this document was revised, but there's opportunities to make it more user-friendly and a lot more interactive, right? When you look at allectronic format for this, there are a lot of other things that we can embed in there that would help people understand what to expect when you go to SRT, right? We actually have videos that we've created before that show what an SRT looks like, right? we've had people role play that out and demonstrate that. So those kinds of things we could embed within this document to make it much more tangible and real for parents. So we'll come with that, a bit more of that discussion to the October meeting.
Melissa.
It seems like a moot point at this point, but I just wanted to agree with what Kim had said. I think the other thing as a teacher that's really disheartening is that teachers may or may not be invited to the school resource team meetings, and that's very difficult because we are along with parents, about 90% of the child's waking hours are in our company, and then to have a cert and a principal that might not necessarily know, they might see their scores or their things on paper, but not actually have any knowledge of the kid in practice. So I think to add to that, I would say classroom teachers, I know in our board it's starting to become mandatory that the classroom teacher has to be there. It has to be a supply teacher provided for that classroom teacher so that for the period of time of the coverage so that they can be part of that too. Because the thought that the teacher is not there, or there's an option that the teacher's not there is ridiculous. But I will say, as somebody who spends most of my job running IPRCs on one side of the table and also having been to many for my son, I say I've had only positive experiences in Halton in terms of the certs of my son's two different schools, helping me prepare for what was coming. But I do agree that most often it's a done deal. It's already... and in those situations, I was happy with that done deal. I knew he was going to a different location. I was happy with that location. We had toured that location. So this was really just a formality, et cetera. I think the difference is when some parents have a different, or the school doesn't inform them of that done deal because they're waiting for that fight or that thing. I think that's when the communication breaks down. I don't know if they're waiting to have the big discussion happen at that meeting or what it is, but for the most part, I've been very happy, probably because I've supported the decisions that I knew were coming anyway. So I would say, yeah, I'm not sure if the IPRC should be a first step for those parents who maybe disagree. I mean, you can always appeal an IPRC decision, but I don't think maybe parents know that enough, and I'm not sure. I'd just say.
I think the last point will be Diane, because I think we've kind of gotten the point across at this point, and we're getting a little repetitive.
I'm totally different.
Okay, good.
I'm totally different. I do have a couple of questions, but I think I would like to attach them to the superintendent's report after I've heard it.
Okay. Fantastic.
So can we just summarize on what the action items are from this?
So from what I understand, there's going to be a rework of the working together document. We do know that there is some training and some communication that will be going out over the next couple of months with our certs and administrators. I think that Mark would like to have a conversation with you, Sherry, directly on some of your instances so he can understand a little bit more. Having said that, there is definitely some struggles with the SRT IPRC process. I think that working through the working together document will help increase the communication. And I think that continuing the conversations around the culture and making sure that parents are feeling welcome is something that's going to be an ongoing conversation. Did I miss anything?
That's what I've got. Hold on, there was something else. Maybe that's it. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions from SEAC? Okay. I have one, actually. I know that, I'm pretty sure it was last fall, might have been the fall before. You did some, at the request of SEAC, some special education sessions, training, information with trustees. And given some of the concerns that we have, I was wondering if we could find out I would love to see the presentations if we can get them. If not, to at least know the topics, the things that were covered, so that we can kind of gauge a level of understanding that's happening around the board table of special education and our students. Yeah.
Sure, I can share the presentations with you. And I know you asked me before, so
I did.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to move on to communications to SEAC. So which of the first is the superintendent's report?
Thank you. I sent this to you earlier today. Not too much earlier, but earlier. Okay, so I have 7 items there, but I'm not going to go into them all, partly because of our time. So I'm going to start with number 3, our gifted assessment tools. So you recall that we came back here last spring and shared with you the need for a relook and then a decision to change our tools that we use in our assessment of students. Our initial when we do the system screen of students for gifted in grade 4, that we were using a different assessment tool. So just letting you know that that rollout is in process right now. This is the time of year when all that goes on pretty quickly with schools, and so that they are well prepared to deliver initiate that screening tools. Thank you, administer with our students. So all that is in process right now. Our ASD pilot classes, which were approved in the budget last June. So sharing with you that those are in process. You can see the things we just actually had a meeting today about this, where we've hired 2 staff to get moving on this, and we're doing a number of things, including looking at design of program in other boards. I think they've contacted 20 boards already to look at what their autism ASD classes look like. They're looking at philosophy, program, training, resources, all those kinds of things are in motion. And we don't have a firm start date. I optimistically have said it'd be great to start after Thanksgiving, and Jane has said to me, realistically, maybe January. So I think we're going to land somewhere in there because we also have to determine profile of students, an intake process, selection process, intake process, all those things, if you can appreciate, have to move along in order for this pilot to get rolling. So just to say all that is in process. We are in year 2 of our BMS implementation, our Behavior Management Systems training. And so about half of our educators, our school-based educators, have been trained, and we're on to the other half this year. We learned a lot in that first year of implementation, and applying that learning to the second year. Lots of positive feedback from staff in the value of this training, and lots of application obviously happening. And a few of the things that we have to determine moving forward is what will our retraining period look like, because that's not defined by the BMS provincial organization. Each board decides what that would look like. We also have to look at training for other staff, non-educator staff, what that would look like. So secretaries, caretakers, etc., and also the long-term sustainability. So this has been a very large undertaking to train thousands of staff in this program. Now, what does that look like ongoing? How do we sustain that training over time? So that work will be, that planning for that will be going on this year as well. And then I'm going to jump down to number 7 there. I normally wouldn't talk about anything school or student specific, but I guess I feel like I should today because this ended up in the press, and I was surprised by that. I don't necessarily think it's in the best interest of that student or anyone that's involved, but there was an incident today that happened at Robert Bateman involving a student and a staff member, and basically they say that it's not our practice to comment on that out of respect for the privacy of the individuals involved. Already, the article I read this afternoon was inaccurate in a number of ways, and but I thought I should address that because this went out pretty quick, and this is why we don't comment in public, because in the end it doesn't necessarily help or support that student, that family, nor there's some of these things can be traumatic for people involved, and that doesn't help them either to sort of have that out there for public consumption. So I don't know. I guess I felt like that's all I can and should say, but I wanted you to appreciate why we don't go there, why that we don't make comments to the press or anywhere else on these things.
So of course it was sort of really upsetting, especially for the families that I represent. It's alarming, I think. So I'm just wondering, can you clarify what was inaccurate about the article? Because families are coming to us to ask about. The article did say that 2 EAs were supposed to be with the student at all times. Yeah. 1 EA left.
But, yeah, but you know what? I'm not even going to go there. Because once
I think it's such a sensitive issue because it is Bateman, and with what's happening, I know students are feeling vulnerable. I know our families are feeling vulnerable, and some of the I had a lot of emails today, and what people are asking and wanted me to ask today was that if students are going to feel vulnerable, these types of situations may occur more often. And so, what is the board planning to do? Did this EA leave because of being understaffed? So people are very, very concerned. I'm hoping that I can provide some clarity based on, what you share with us today.
Right. So I believe some communication is going to happen from the school to families.
It already went out.
Okay,
It went out. It was very vague.
Yeah, and so.
To me, it didn't reassure.
Sorry, which families?
To Bateman families. So I have 2 children at Bateman. And the communication did come out from the principal.
Yeah.
Today, this afternoon.
So the intent is, and if it didn't do this, then it's good for me to hear this. The intent is to reassure. The intent is, number one, to inform people to the extent that we can, once again, without violating the privacy, right? So. I know sometimes people want to know more, and the fact that they can't learn more can be difficult. I get that. So I guess what we want people to feel is some confidence that when a situation happens, many things are done to try to avoid those ever happening in the first place. So there are many things that happen in terms of planning for what the needs of students are so that those needs are well met. Having appropriate training for staff. Having good plans in place in terms of number one, trying to avoid any incident from happening, and number 2, if they do happen, how to respond. Plans and training and practice to keep all staff and students safe. For parents to have confidence that all those things go on for all of our students, because they do, in fact, that we want that to be, that confidence to be there. At the same time, appreciating that if, to put yourself in the shoes of that family or that staff member who's whatever has experienced, that to have that out there in the public can be, that would be pretty upsetting and concerning if, for example, if you're the parent of that child. So trying to respect that. And for parents to understand that, we want you to hear this much and feel confident from that, and to understand why you can't hear this other detail. So that's what we hope through that communication. If you don't feel that from that communication, that's good for me to hear, because then I'll go back to the staff. I wasn't involved in the crafting of that, but I can go back to the staff and say, So we need more reassurance out there for parents.
So just to kind of, the email was very brief, which is fine. And I think the bulk of it is this morning at approximately 10 a.m. a student became aggressive towards staff members. Halton Emergency Services were contacted, immediately responded to the school. No other student was involved in this incident. One of our staff members was taken to the hospital as a precaution. We want to assure parents that we're looking into it. So as a parent, I'm concerned, is that staff member okay? Because all it says they were taken as a precaution. I don't know if that, I guess as a parent, it doesn't give me that warm fuzzy that everybody's okay and initially they're okay, and that there's going to be some actions put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. Yeah. And I get what you're saying about privacy and all of that. I really do. I just think there needs to be a little bit more reassurance as a parent to know that we're going to be putting some actions in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. Sophie, Amy, and then Jason.
So further to that, I just would like to say that if this had not appeared online in the manner in which it did, there would have been no need for the communication. And so this was not a communication that we would have normally sent out. And I thought that the principal did a good job of saying what he could say without violating the privacy of the student or the staff member.
I get that. I'm just telling you as a parent, sure. I don't feel reassured. Yeah. So, Jason and...
So I'm just going to respond about your concern about the staff member. That staff member, we would want his or her consent to say, we want to be able to say this to the community. And if they don't want to, for whatever reason, because but I'm not okay, or I am, or I'm very private, or I have this other condition, physically, mentally, whatever, that is, impacts all of this, and I don't want any of that out there. So
fair enough. I'm just giving you feedback as a parent. It didn't make me feel better. So sorry, Jason.
I would have to start off by saying there's obviously a problem with how this is being communicated to parents, because until I read your superintendent's report, I had no idea. I just checked with my wife. We received nothing at home. Our son is in that class, and if I hadn't read the Inside Halton article, I wouldn't have known it was a male EA, and I wouldn't have known it was not my son involved. So there has to be some question of balance between no one knowing about these things and people understanding what's happening in their own classroom. Because, my son is given to behavior issues from time to time. I completely understand that. I would not want that smeared all over the front page either. But at the same token, if you have a student in the classroom that is potentially violent towards others, that's something that people need to be at least aware of, that risk in the classroom. And there's obviously something wrong with the mailing list, or however this was sent out, that people who weren't even in that class got notice, and parents of kids in the class didn't. So there's something seriously wrong there.
Yeah, we'll look into that for sure.
Sophie?
I think my question was more around, because it was in the press, and as you mentioned, if there were inaccuracies in the press, I think it's fair to ask for some clarification to find out whether you share that with the families or with us, so we can correct that, so that our kids that are there, we can reassure the families that, you know what, if they made a mistake, they take ownership and say, oh, sorry, there was supposed to be 2 A's and this happened, and that we're going to make sure that doesn't happen again. Or there was in fact 2 A's in the room and the newspaper article reported that incorrectly, or, just so people understand that it's been taken care of. I think that's because it was in the paper. I think if it wasn't, right, it'd be a different story.
If I could just jump in with one point. I can understand not wanting to debate this with the press, and Inside Halton is only like one level up of integrity from the Burlington Gazette anyway. But they're talking about it being a padded room in the special education area, which I think is a real mischaracterization of what that room is. And at the very least, that should set the record straight. Because you don't want them thinking, oh, well, that was one of the kids in a straitjacket that, bites on a piece of wood all day. I mean, that's a terrible mischaracterization of what goes on there.
Yeah, so thanks for that feedback of how it looks, how it feels. That's important for me to hear. So I'll go back and share that. This all happened fairly quickly today, and this doesn't happen very often where an incident like this ends up in the paper. Gladly so, because it's fraught with all the things that we're talking about here, right? But I think it's all very unfair to both the family, the student, and the school, the staff. So I'll take this back and we'll look at, is there more that can go out there that would be helpful for people? But that's why this is just not, I think it's very inappropriate to be in the press. That's my personal, professional opinion.
Diane, did you have other questions for Mark?
Going back to last June, when we were discussing budget and the fact that there was $300,000 of PD funding for building capacity to work with students with learning disabilities. And I think somewhere along the line, either to the board or to CCAC, Mark, you reported that $160,000 had been spent. The request from LDA Halton was that I know a lot of the PD that took place, and my numbers don't come anywhere near $160,000. So I'd like, or LDAH would like to know what PD was offered and a dollar sign beside it. We asked for that in June, and I guess my question is, when can I expect, or when can we expect to get that information? That's my first question.
Yeah, thanks. I know you did ask that. So I'm just going to look to Jane. Timing, do you think we can realistically have that? There's a calculation part to this. Can we have that, do you think, by the end of the month? Is that reasonable? Yeah. So I'll commit to the end of the month. If there's a problem with that, I'll let you know, but we should be able to do that.
And the second concern I brought to you in the summertime, I had a parent share with me a statement of decision from an IPRC for an initial identification for learning disabilities, and the definition under the exceptionality was the old definition, which goes back to 1982, and the new definition for PPM 8 came out in 2014. And so I'm wondering why that is still floating around our system and how it got past everybody, because it only took me 2 seconds to recognize it. And my request at that time was that all initial IPRCs be reviewed for the last 3 years, and any for learning disabilities be pulled and checked to see which definition is listed under the exceptionality and corrections being sent out. My information today is that information has not been received as yet by the specific parent, and her interpretation was that the principal actually asked why she was asking it was why she was stating that it was outdated. So again, I'd like to know when that's, what is the process for that, and how can we expect that to play out?
So as I shared with you earlier, I wanted to make sure that we have the right language from PPM 8, and I was looking for I looked for clarity from staff of clarity of how we know that how far back did parents receive that inaccurate definition, and if at any other point in time they would have received other documentation that had the right definition. So what we decided was that we would issue a letter to all parents of students who where their child was identified as with a learning disability, and the number over the past 3 years, Jane, was approximately 450. Sorry, around 450 or so. There is an exact number, obviously, but off the top of my head, it's around 450 students over the past 3 years, and we have finalized that letter that will go out to all of those families, and a copy will go into their OSR as well, so that that correct language is there also. And so, Jane, I know we've had secretarial staff looking to do that, and it's going out. Yeah, and we decided to mail them, to actually do snail mail if you want, as a way, because emails and everything else, this is sort of, we know that families have an address, they live somewhere, so we decided to go with mail. So that will go to all families over from the past 3 years.
Can you share with me what that letter says?
Sure, we can send you a copy.
It will help me to understand, if they will understand what's being asked.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So committees and other reports. We already had a big report on the spec ed. We know what's happening in the spec ed review. I do want to put just a really quick little, for the special education plan review for this year, we'll be talking about it more in October. But the approach we've decided to do is to identify through the associations, et cetera, if there are specific sections that need to be looked at. So next month we'll talk about if there, like if you say section 4 needs to be looked at for whatever reason. So again, we're not going to go every single section. What we're asking you to do is to look at it and bring to us, or bring to the SEAC, the sections that need to be reviewed and edited and looked at. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in October on what that is going to look like going forward. Yes.
So just a clarification. Is the spec ed review that we're going to provide the input to, we're going to talk about in October, is it, like in the past, sometimes I find the spec ed reviews have been, grammar oriented or terminology, or is it going to be, I think we need to evaluate this prestige, so it's more content oriented versus, terminology and grammar. So which is it this time?
It's more content oriented. Keeping in mind the spec ed plan needs to reflect what is in current practice. So it is more content. Last year we did some more grammar. I think no matter how often you do a review, there's always going to be grammar errors and spelling errors and whatever else. But I'm talking more content. So to the point of we're talking about the definition of LD, I'm pretty sure in the spec ed plan it's right. But if for some reason it were not, that's what I'm talking about. If there are certain things that you say, I really like this reviewed, it may not get changed in the spec ed plan, but maybe it becomes an action item that SEAC deals with later. So yes, I'm talking more content, not grammar, not that sort of thing, but the content, okay? Pick.
Okay, the 10th annual PIC conference is coming up on the 14th at Craig Kielburger in Milton. There will be busing again due to definite lack of parking. Registration at 8:15 and welcome at 9. And the theme is 21st Century Student Success, Creating a Culture of Equity, Inclusion, and Well-Being. Keynote is Candy Palmeter on the road less traveled. And then there's also the free workshops that follow the keynote. And there's child minding available for children under 13. And if I can send you the link, Suzanne, as far as going on for the workshop detail schedule and registration. Okay.
And question for you. Are there opportunities for kids to help volunteer, like child minding and stuff like that? Who should they contact?
I will find out on Thursday at the PIC meeting for you and let you know. Thank you.
So once again, SEAC will have a table there. I'm going to be looking for people to come and help man it. I am not manning it by myself this year. That's what I did last year. So I would really appreciate some help manning the table. Yes, LDH. And I know that they usually, what I had asked Pat Pick in the past is to put all of the SEAC associations in a row. So maybe you can kind of send that message along again. That
I'm on that committee, so
okay.
I'll
So to kind of have all the SEAC associations in a row so we can help each other out to cover off on tables, etc.
Will we have, I know in past years we've had copies of the Working Together document, or even possibly business-sized cards with the website.
We usually have a bunch of flyers and information with us when we're there. And I think we do have a couple copies of the Working Together document usually. Mm-hmm. Yes, Amy.
I'm assuming they're going to do the grab bags again. Perhaps those business-sized cards could go in each grab bag so that if people don't visit the table, I mean, that's a small expense for us to provide.
Yes, Diane.
Word of caution, the printed copy that is in existence now, the Working Together document, may or may not have the revised PPM amended to it. So please make sure that it does if you're going to use that.
So the better might be a little card to put in the grab bags with the link rather than.
Yeah, because I have the old version that I give out in my other hat, but I tell them to go to the website for the most accurate.
The website and the board plan doesn't have the actual definitions spelled out. It has the link to the ministry PPM.
Accessibility Coordinating Committee.
Okay, we have a new lead for the Accessibility Coordinating Committee. It's Assistant Principal Mary Marshall. She started on September the 1st, and she's now in the process of putting together the meetings for the following year. They will be on Thursday morning between 9 and 11 in the trustee boardroom. Thank you.
Equity and Inclusive Education.
I received an email from the new leader for the Equity and Inclusive Education Advisory Committee asking for people to be on the committee. I am willing to stay on that committee if that is SEAC's wish, and I will let them know.
Good with me. Anyone have any objections? I know exactly. So, yeah.
There's only 3 meetings a year, and we are looking for a SEAC member.
Thank you. Protocol and communications. I have a little bit of an update on the pro grant for you. I did submit a pro grant for the pamphlet that we talked about at the end of last year. I had not heard if that has been approved or not yet. And so I will let you know once we hear. You guys haven't heard about yours either, right? So yeah, apparently we haven't heard. So I'll keep you updated. Suzanne, you know what's missing from our agenda? The association's updates and trustee updates. That my mistake for not catching it too. So do we have really quick, because we're almost out of time and I really don't want to extend the meeting. I was really trying to avoid this. It's 9:32. Can I get a motion to extend for 10 minutes? Diane and Rochelle, and that's it. So, Diane, do you have LDH?
Okay, school is back, and LDH is gearing up. So our remedial reading instruction is full with a very long waiting list, unfortunately. We are also launching a social skills program next month. We have a grant from Canada Post to run technology training for students, and we are waiting to see if we are successful in getting another pro-grant which will focus on technology training for parents. Our AGM is September the 27th, coming up, 7 p.m. for members and those interested in becoming members. And our conference for March the 22nd, 2018 is shaping up and will be online next month for registration. The keynote speaker is Damien Cooper, who is a private consultant with expertise in assessment. Damien's newest book is Redefining FAIR, How to Plan, Assess, and Grade for Excellence in Mixed-Ability Classrooms. The keynote will give an overview of the 3 pillars of assessment: observation, conversations, and products, following ministry guidelines. Damien will also follow up with a breakout session that goes into more detail. Other breakout sessions will cover wellness, resilience, technology, reading, and math. And I will send that to you, Suzanne.
Any other association reports? All right, trustee report.
Thank you. We've had one meeting back so far. We did receive a power update, and it looks like we're going to receive a power update about every second meeting. But also, I know there's a lot of communication coming here. But they are video voice recorded, if that's something that you wanted to tune into. At our last meeting, we approved our capital request to the province. Included on that was the need for a new elementary school in Oakville, but also the renovations to Nelson and Bateman. Nelson and were on that as well. Coming up at our next meeting, we're going to look at high performance programs, the Power Architect appointment, EQAO, Summer Learning Initiatives, and boundary review for Milton. And the one after that will be, I'm not sure if we meet, but the Close the Gap update as well might be of interest to some people around this table. Thanks.
Thank you. I don't even know what's on our next agenda. Yeah, well, apparently we'll have had a spec review meeting, so I'll have an update on that. Oh, yes, we'll be talking about the SPED plan. Thank you. I'm sorry, my brain is now shutting down on me. So if there is anything else that you guys need to hear about, questions, please let us know enough in advance so we can kind of plan for it. Is there anything else before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Can I get a motion to adjourn? Jason? Michelle? All in favor? Thank you very much.